He stood alone on the rooftop, staring at the city lights below like tiny souls flickering in the night. His name was Armin. To the world, he was a grown man. Broad shoulders, tired eyes, a face carved by years of pretending he was strong. But inside, he felt small. Smaller than the dust beneath his feet. The cold wind brushed against his skin, the kind of wind that feels like it wants to push you forward, or knock you down if you're too weak to hold on. He lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. The smoke rose slowly, as if even it didn't want to stay close to him. He whispered to himself, voice breaking. Why does life feel heavier every single day? Armin lived in a world where men were measured by their houses, cars, loud voices, and the weight of their pride. And by all those standards, he was failing. He worked at a small local hardware shop, earning just enough to pay rent for his tiny one-room apartment. His clothes were washed out, his shoes tired. But worst of all, he carried a heart filled with shame. Because Armin once dreamed big. He once believed he would be more. But life had a way of breaking the dreamers first. His father used to say, "A man who bends for others is not a man." His brother used to laugh. "Soft people are losers." His friends would mock him. "Why don't you speak up? Why are you always silent?" And somewhere between their words, Armin began shrinking. One night, a fight exploded inside the shop. A customer insulted him, threw money at him like he was some beggar. Armin didn't speak, didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself. He simply bowed his head and apologized, not because he was wrong, but because he was scared. Because his self-worth was as fragile as glass. His boss later shouted at him, "You let him humiliate you. You're a grown man, Armin. Act like it." But how could he act like what he didn't know how to be? At home, he sat on the floor of his empty room. No furniture except a mattress and a single bulb that flickered like it disagreed with existing. He checked his phone, no messages. His mother rarely called. His ex-fiancée had left him a year ago, saying, "You have no ambition. I need someone who knows what he wants. Not someone afraid of everything." He didn't blame her, because in his own eyes, he was already defeated. But fate works in strange, brutal ways. And sometimes, life decides to slap you in the face, not to destroy you, but to wake you up. One evening, as Armin was locking the shop, he heard a familiar voice behind him, a voice from his past. "Armin?" He turned. Layla. The woman he once promised a future to. The woman who once believed he could conquer the world. She looked different now, stronger, confident, successful. She wore a long black coat, hair tied neatly, eyes sharp like they remembered everything. You look well," Armin muttered awkwardly. She nodded. "I got promoted. I'm regional manager now." A silence sat between them like a wall he couldn't climb. Layla sighed softly. "Armin, I didn't come here to hurt you." But every word she spoke did exactly that. "I came to say, I'm getting married." His heart dropped, but he forced a small smile, the kind a dying man gives when someone asks if he's okay. "That's great. I'm happy for you." But she stared into his eyes, long enough to see everything he tried to hide. "You're still scared, aren't you?" she whispered. Armin didn't answer. "Still hiding behind excuses. Still shrinking so others don't notice you. Still small." Her words were a knife. And she walked away before he could even bleed. Armin stood still, like the world froze around him. Traffic moved, people laughed, lights flickered, but all of it felt distant. His chest felt tight, like 1,000 hands were squeezing his lungs. He hated her for saying it. He hated himself because it was true. That night, back on the rooftop, cigarette burning between his fingers, Armin whispered to the sky, "Why am I like this? Why can't I be a man?" And then, a sound echoed from below. A man yelling. Anger. Fear. A thud. Armin leaned over the railing. Down on the street, he saw an old man, thin, weak, struggling, pushed to the ground by a young guy who then spat near him and walked away laughing. People passed by. Nobody helped. Nobody cared. Armin watched the old man try to get up, hands shaking, tears in his eyes. But his legs wouldn't move. Something inside Armin cracked. The same silence he lived in now stood right in front of him. The same humiliation he swallowed now unfolded in someone else's life. And in that moment, Armin realized something. It wasn't the world that made him small. It was the 6 invisible chains wrapped around his soul. Silence, fear, comparison, pride, blame, and excuses. He stared at the old man, and for the first time in years, his body moved before his doubts could stop him. Armin rushed downstairs, heart pounding, legs shaking, mind screaming. "What are you doing? You'll embarrass yourself. You're no hero." But something deeper whispered, "Maybe being a man is simply showing up." When he reached the street, the old man was still struggling to get up, body trembling as cars passed him like he didn't exist. Armin knelt down beside him. "Let me help you." The old man looked up, eyes filled with confusion, pain, and a hint of hope. Nobody had said those words to him all evening. As Armin helped him stand, the old man gripped his arm and whispered, "Thank you, son." And that single word, "son," felt like a door unlocking inside Armin. But as he dusted off the old man's coat, a voice echoed behind him. The same young guy who shoved the old man earlier had returned. "Look at you," he sneered. "Tiny man. Think you're a hero now?" Armin froze. The world held its breath. Would he walk away again? Would he shrink? Would he bow his head like always? Armin's heart thundered in his chest. His throat was dry. His hands trembled. But he slowly turned around, and for the first time in his life, he didn't look away. Armin stood facing the young man, the streetlight casting long shadows between them. His voice trembled, but he did not look away. "I'm not trying to be a hero," Armin said softly. "Just a human being." The young man smirked, stepping closer. "Humans survive by being strong. You're nothing." And just like that, the old habits clawed back. Armin felt it again, the shrinking, the embarrassment, the instinct to apologize, to lower his gaze, to disappear. But then the old man beside him coughed, weak, fragile, depending on him to remain standing. Armin exhaled slowly. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about pride. It was about not abandoning himself again. He didn't reply to the young man. He didn't argue. He simply held the old man's arm and led him away. Because sometimes the loudest strength is choosing silence when the world expects violence. They walked slowly down the street. Cars roared around them, neon signs glowed, the world continued spinning as if kindness didn't matter. Armin found a small bench nearby and helped the old man sit. "You shouldn't have interfered," the old man whispered with weak breath. "People don't like those who remind them of their own lack of heart." Armin sat beside him. "Maybe that's why I've lived invisible." The old man looked at him, truly looked, deep into the eyes of someone drowning in his own quiet suffering. "What weighs you down, son?" he asked. Armin didn't know why. Maybe the night was too heavy, maybe silence had broken too long ago. But suddenly the words escaped from his lips like water bursting through a cracked dam. "I'm tired," Armin whispered. "Tired of being afraid. Tired of never speaking. Tired of letting people walk over me. Tired of losing everything because I never stood up, not even for myself." His voice broke. He wiped his face, pretending the tears were sweat. "I lost the woman I loved. I lost respect in others' eyes. I lost my courage somewhere, and now I don't know how to get it back." The old man didn't give advice. He didn't quote wisdom or pretend to have answers. He simply placed a trembling hand on Armin's shoulder. "Then begin," he said. "Not by shouting. Not by proving. Begin by not abandoning yourself anymore." Those words struck deeper than punishment. Armin felt his breath shake. Begin. A word so small, yet heavier than any mountain he had ever tried to climb. A week passed, and life didn't magically change. But something inside Armin shifted, quietly, like a seed beneath the soil deciding it wants to see the sun. On the first morning, he looked in the mirror and didn't look away. On the second, he walked into the shop and greeted his boss before being spoken to. On the third, when a customer insulted him for a price being too high, he calmly said, "You don't have to buy it. But you won't speak to me like that." His voice still shook. His palms still sweated. But he didn't shrink. On the fifth day, his boss pulled him aside. "You're different." "What happened?" Armin didn't have an answer. Because change wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It was made of tiny decisions that nobody clapped for. One evening, his younger brother visited him, just to borrow money, not to check how he was. As always, he walked inside the small apartment and scoffed. "This is how you live? A grown man in a room the size of a closet? Don't you feel ashamed?" Armin felt that familiar sting. That instinct to defend, to explain, to shrink. But instead, he simply nodded calmly. "This is where I am. But it's not where I'll stay." His brother stared, confused. That wasn't the answer Armin used to give. The days turned to weeks. Armin noticed something unsettling. As he grew, the world around him grew uncomfortable. People who once benefited from his silence disliked his voice. People who once loved his obedience resented his boundaries. People who felt tall beside him felt small now that he was rising. And that is when life tested him deeply. His boss, frustrated by Armin's new quiet confidence, cornered him one evening in the shop. "So this is who you are now? You think you're better than us because you say no?" Armin shook his head. "No. I'm just done saying yes when I mean no. You're replaceable." His boss snapped. Armin felt the fear, cold, suffocating, wrap around his ribs. He needed this job. It was his only income. His rent, his food, his survival depended on it. But he remembered the rooftop. He remembered shrinking. He remembered Layla's voice telling him he was still scared. He remembered the old man saying, "Begin." So he met his boss's eyes and spoke quietly. "If you replace me, then that is your choice. But I will not replace myself with a silent ghost again." The boss stared, speechless, stunned, and walked away. Armin stood alone, his knees weak, his throat tight. But this time, he did not collapse internally. He had defended himself, not violently, not arrogantly, but with truth. That night, while walking home, he saw Layla across the street, laughing, her hand inside another man's. She didn't notice him, but Armin noticed something inside himself. He didn't ache. He didn't break. He simply whispered, "You made the right choice. I was not ready then." And as he walked away, for the first time, he didn't feel small. A month later, he received an unexpected call. The old man, the one he helped, had asked a shopkeeper for him. "Find Armin," he said. "Tell him I have something for him." Armin hesitated. Why now? What could this frail stranger possibly offer? But something urged him to go. He found the old man sitting outside a quiet tea stall, wrapped in a shawl, sipping slowly. The old man smiled when he saw him. "I knew you would come," he said. "Why did you call me?" Armin asked. The old man handed him a folded paper. Inside was an address, and a single line written in trembling handwriting. "If you want to understand where true strength begins, come." Armin looked up, confused, anxious, curious. "What is this place?" he asked. The old man's eyes glimmered, not like a weak stranger, but like someone who had once been powerful enough to lose everything, and still remain standing. "It is where small men become real," he whispered. Armin's heart pounded. A crossroads stood before him. Stay in the life he knew, or walk into the unknown. He closed his eyes. The 6 chains he once carried, silence, fear, comparison, pride, blame, excuses, echoed softly inside him. But he was not the same man anymore. He opened his eyes and nodded. "I'll go." And as Armin walked away, the old man watched with a quiet smile. Because not everyone chooses the road that hurts before it heals. And the place Armin was about to enter would force him to confront the darkest truth about himself. The next morning, just as the sky was washed pale with dawn, Armin stood outside the address written on the paper. It wasn't a building made of marble or glass. It wasn't a school or a hall or some place that announced wisdom through banners and noise. It was an old, abandoned warehouse. Its bricks were cracked, its windows dusty. It looked as forgotten as the parts of himself Armin had buried long ago. For a moment, fear spoke again. What if this is foolish? What if I'm wasting time? What if nothing changes? But he swallowed that voice and pushed open the creaking door. Inside, faint sunlight spilled through broken windows. Dust floated like ghosts in the air. The floor was empty except for a lone metal chair in the center of the room, and sitting on that chair was the old man. Armin froze. "You!" The old man held up his hand. "Sit!" Armin obeyed, sitting on the cold floor across from him, like a student before a teacher he never expected. The old man's voice echoed softly in that vast, quiet space. "You think 6 things make you small. But you are wrong." Armin looked up, confused. "You were small," the old man continued, "because you believed you were." Then he leaned forward, eyes sharp with years of unspoken truth. "Let me show you what truly makes a man small." His words were slow, heavy, each one a stone placed on Armin's chest. A small man waits for others to give him permission. Armin felt his breath catch. He remembered every time he waited to be chosen, waited to be seen, waited for life to rescue him. A small man runs from discomfort and calls it peace. Armin thought of every conversation he avoided, every truth he swallowed, every moment he backed away from his own power. A small man blames the world, and never asks what he could have done differently. He remembered nights spent blaming fate, money, his father, Layla, luck, everything except himself. A small man demands respect with loud words, but never earns it with quiet action. He remembered all the men he envied, the loud ones, while never realizing silence can be strength too. A small man wants to be understood, yet he never understands himself. Armin felt that one like a spear, because there were days he didn't even know what he felt, who he was, or what he feared. Then came the final truth. The old man looked directly into his soul. And a small man is the one who knows he is capable of more, yet never begins. Silence swallowed the room. Armin lowered his head. His chest tightened, with grief, with realization, with the weight of his own choices. "Then what makes a man big?" Armin whispered. The old man stood slowly, his bones stiff but his spirit towering. "A big man doesn't need to win. A big man doesn't need applause. A big man doesn't need to shout." He placed a hand over his heart. "A big man is simply a man who refuses to abandon himself." Armin closed his eyes. Every memory rushed through him. Childhood dreams, shame, silence, love lost, nights of fear, moments he surrendered to smallness. And suddenly, something inside him cracked open, not like breaking, like a seed opening. Tears rolled silently down his face. He didn't wipe them. He let them fall, let them cleanse years of tightness. The old man spoke one final time. "Strength is not born in sunlight. It begins in the dark, right here. Right now, when no one watches, when no one claps, when you decide, alone, that you will rise." Armin didn't respond. He simply stood up. And the old man nodded, because sometimes the answer is not a sentence, but a posture. Armin walked toward the warehouse door and pushed it open. Outside, life waited, loud, messy, demanding. As he took his first step into the daylight, something became clear. His life would not transform overnight. He would still make mistakes. Fear would still whisper. Doubt would still visit. But he would no longer leave himself behind. He would begin, again and again and again. Months passed. Armin did not become a king. He did not become wealthy overnight. He did not suddenly gain a perfect life. Instead, something stronger grew. He rented a slightly larger room. He started helping at a night shelter twice a week. He enrolled in a small evening course to learn carpentry. Because he always loved building things with his hands, but never admitted it out loud. His boss eventually fired him, not out of anger, but because Armin himself chose to leave. "The shop doesn't fit me anymore," he said with calm, not rebellion. 1 year later, Armin stood in front of a wooden door. A new shop. His shop. Small. Humble. But built by his own hands. Armin's carpentry and repair, built with care. Customers didn't flood in. Some days, no one came at all. But every plank he sanded, every chair he repaired, every table he crafted carried something he never had before. Presence he no longer chased being big. He chased not abandoning himself. One evening, Layla walked past his shop, by accident. She paused at the window, staring at him through the glass. He looked up. Their eyes met. There was no ache and no regret. Only quiet understanding. She smiled. He smiled and no words. Just peace. Because sometimes the most powerful closure is simply finally being whole without needing anything back. At closing time, Armin locked his shop and stepped outside. The wind was the same as it was that night on the rooftop. But he was not. He walked home, shoulders relaxed, steps grounded, breathing steady. And as he passed a familiar alley, he noticed a man being mocked, pushed, insulted. The same cruelty, the same scene, the same pain, except this time Armin didn't hesitate. He walked toward them, not loud, not violent, but clear. "Stop," he said. The men turned to face him, and Armin stood, not bigger, not smaller, simply present. A mountain is not tall because it shouts. It is tall because it does not bow. In the end, greatness is not loud. Strength is not sharp. Manhood is not dominance. A big man is simply a man who chooses himself, even when the world does not. And Armin, once a shadow, became the kind of man who was no longer afraid to begin.